Hello everybody and welcome along to a brand new video today where we're just 24 hours away from the third episode of Doctor Who Series 11, but what can we expect from Rosa? So yes, it's our first trip into the past after we had a sort of present day first episode, a future second episode. We're now going into the past and back to 1955 Alabama. For Rosa Parks and the sort of story around her and some interesting things going on, I sense. So yes, this episode very much does sound like classic sort of time travel Doctor Who, historical Doctor Who, where you go back in time to some significant historical person or historical event, and there's some other villain there trying to change history for some reason. And that sounds like the sort of thing we're getting this time around, which sounds to me like a really fun and exciting idea, and I'm really looking forward to it. But it's certainly going to be an interesting one because there's a lot of different issues to tackle with this episode. Now, reading the sort of previews for this episode from people who've already seen it, what seems to be the overriding sort of feeling is that it is quite almost an educational story, very much going back to the roots of Doctor Who from the very early 1960s when Doctor Who was first, if you don't know, when Doctor Who was first made as a show back in 1963. Sidney Newman, the sort of kind of showrunnery guy or sort of executive producer above Verity Lambert at the time, very much wanted Doctor Who to be educational. So you'd go back in time to historical events and you'd very much, as well as having a story and a sort of villain to defeat and all that kind of thing, you'd also have a lot of kind of background and kind of trying to teach sort of children about this time in history and sort of about these sort of issues of the times. You think of stuff like Marco Polo or the Aztecs or the Romans. Well, actually, not so much the Romans, but certainly Marco Polo and the Aztecs back then. Those sort of, educational based stories. And it sounds like that's what they're going for with this episode of Doctor Who. It was rumoured a very long time ago, months ago, that Chris was going to try and do some more educational based historicals, and it does sound like that's what we're getting for this story, where I think the episode's very much going to be focused sort of, or have a heavy sort of emphasis on the kind of racial issues of the time, being the 1950s, having it directly affecting Yaz and Ryan as well, of course, because they're both black, and sort of tackling those issues, which I think is going to be really fascinating. Obviously with that there's the potential for it to not be boring, but to just be a little bit too educational and less exciting. So I'm confident they're going to be able to strike that right balance, but it is something interesting to see, because I don't feel like we've gone that far into that in Doctor Who, certainly in New Who at all, in terms of tackling those sort of issues in a historical story. So I am fascinated to see how they're going to put that together and whether it is actually going to work as an enjoyable story or whether it's going to kind of drag the episode down a bit. I'm really interested to see. But I mean, it should certainly help to give that kind of increased realism of the time period and really very much kind of reminding us that we have gone back in time and this is what the world was like in 1955. And I think that's important with a historical story. When you're wanting to be sort of have a fairly serious story and have it historical, you've got to be historically accurate in that sense. And of course, the racial issues were massive at the time. Sort of in America in the 1950s, that was a massive thing, and so I think it would be a mistake to completely ignore that. So I'm pleased they're going with it, and it's certainly a bold story as a whole to even tackle for Doctor Who, and it certainly needs to be done right. Otherwise, well, it's one of those where it could go catastrophically wrong and get swathes of criticism across the board, or it could be absolutely nailed and be absolutely fantastic. And I hope and I'm confident it's going to be the latter. But it is certainly quite a risky story, I think you would say. Personally, sort of historical stories have never really been my favourite stories in Doctor Who. I think I've just always enjoyed the more sort of sci-fi, high-tech, futuristic, alien planets, that element of sci-fi, rather than the sort of looking back in time at sort of old historical periods where it's very low-tech. And just for me, I found a bit less interesting. But I am still really interested in this story, kind of more than I was expecting. And once I read the sort of synopsis when it's talking about Rosa Parks and some sort of villains trying to change history and things like that, it's just quite an exciting concept. Even if it's been done before, who cares if it's been done before? But it's just an exciting idea to sort of them having to try and stop some guy who apparently is a bit like Captain Jack, just not as fun and interesting, I think, apparently, and also might have something on his wrist, if you get my gist. And so he sounds like the villain of it, just to sound quite a nice idea and a fun idea of having to sort of stop them changing history. But with all this, I'm very intrigued to see sort of what the tone of the episode is. Is it going to be quite a sombre, not necessarily sombre, but quite a serious, sort of telling the sort of sad story of racial issues back in the 1950s? Or will it still be fairly upbeat? Will it still be fairly light-hearted? Of course, that seems to be what Series 11's going for a bit more. I'm just fascinated to see kind of how that's actually brought out in this episode. And just looking back at how this episode's come together, well, this is probably the episode that we've had arguably the most information about for a very, very long time. Because back in, goodness knows when that was, I'm sure some of my people in the comments will know, but I think it might be February, January, something like that. When they were out filming in South Africa, there were pictures of the bus, the sort of bus from the Rosa Parks story, as it were, out in South Africa, and that gave very, very strong hints that it was going to be a story about Rosa Parks, and of course that has become the case. So yes, it's going to have some nice, hopefully some spectacular South African visuals, and hopefully it will really give the feel of 1955 Alabama and just really bring us into that world again, as it were. Certainly with the sort of visuals of the series so far, I'm very, very optimistic for that. Yeah, hopefully it all looks stunning. And the one other thing that I've read that was quite interesting, sort of at least for me personally, was the music. And it was said that one of the previews said that Sega Nakanolo has gone for a slightly more Murray Gold-esque route in his music for this story, kind of implying that there's kind of more strong, dominant themes, more, not necessarily bombastic music, but kind of where the music is more noticeable rather than being more atmospheric, which I think will be interesting to see what he does with it, because so far the first two episodes have been very much an atmospheric score, sort of helping the scene but never leading the scene, and it'll be interesting to see if the sort of some of the music takes over a little bit in Rosa. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm just very, very intrigued to see how that's going to all sort of turn out. But overall, I'm fascinated to see what this story is going to be like. Certainly it sounds like a very, very interesting one, tackling this issue in history, maybe being more educational, going back to the roots of Doctor Who in that sense, and yeah, just having obviously the sort of sci-fi element in it as well. It just sounds like it's got all the ingredients to be a really, really good story, and I feel like at this stage we do, in the next 2 to 3 episodes, we need a sort of properly good classic story. Because not that the first 2 episodes have been bad, they've just been nothing spectacular, I think it's fair to say. So at some point fairly soon we do need one of those sort of, wow, that is an amazing story. That's like your series topping sort of story. That's the best story I've had in years kind of thing. That's what we need soon. Don't know if Rosa's going to be that, but I'm very interested to find out. But what about you guys? What are you looking forward to about this episode? Do you know anything more than me? Don't put too many spoilers, but if you do know anything else, do let me know in the comments below. And just let me know what your hopes are for this story as well. Are you looking forward to the educational element that we might be getting in this episode of Doctor Who? Or do you prefer it to just be sort of pure sci-fi? Do let me know in the comments below. Other than that, guys, do remember to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here. Thanks for all the new subscribers. I've gained lots over the last few days. Hope you guys have all been enjoying the sort of daily uploads I've been managing to do. I think I've kind of, at least at the moment, aiming to upload every single day that there's not Doctor Who on. I'm trying to do an upload. Certainly that worked this week, but we'll have to see if it works for the coming weeks as well. But I hope you're enjoying the content at the moment, and thank you to all you new subscribers. But other than that, guys, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon for another video. Goodbye.